And action.
Action. Makeup. That was another B-roll for you. Alright, so we're back, guys. We are about to let the drywallers come in and hang the sheetrock, but I wanted to talk with you a little bit about InSoFast. So this is our InSoFast review. We'll have some links down below as I reference some of these. So first thing I wanted to talk to you about is around the window detail. Now we did something different than what they showed. They showed a really ingenious way really to cut a 2x6 along the corrugation lines and sandwich it and so forth, but that left a raw or pressure treated 2x4 exposed on the exterior. And that's fine if you're going to do exterior siding. However, if not, what that would have left us is a very interesting 2x6 that we'd have to flash and along the corrugation line, which would have been really difficult unless we used a liquid flash or something like that, and then it wouldn't have looked real great. So for them, what they do is they put the insulation on the outside and then they wrap that 2x6 in trim work and it looks fine. So we're going to do something different next time, but if you look up here behind this kind of orangish pinkish foam is actually in a angle iron frame. But so the frame's in there. We had to space the InSoFast off of that frame because it obviously is flat, and so where the corrugations are, the InSoFast wouldn't go to the deep parts. So anyways, so we spaced it off that channel a little bit. We had to fill that with some of the great stuff, spray foam, and that worked fine. So what I want to talk with you about is this interface here. You'll notice as you have to cut each panel to go around your openings, you'll obviously have to measure and so forth. And this one looks pretty decent. We have a good tongue and groove pattern. This is the bottom of the panel interfacing with the top of the panel below it, and it's nice and clean. But if you pop over here with me real quick and take a look at this one. Now these panels here are the remnants of the panels that were cut over there. So this is the middle and or top strip of that panel, and obviously when you cut them there is no tongue and groove on them, so they don't interface well. You have to really line them up, and there can be a gap depending on how they line up and so forth. But I wanted to talk with you about what happens when you cut these boards and you lose that interface between the top of the first one and the bottom of the next one. They do not sit well together. So the next thing I want to talk with you about is their installation video. It's really neat. It shows the panels going up really fast. Obviously they kind of pre-prepped, laid them out, pre-cut them, which is expected, and then pop them up. Now what it doesn't talk about is the top of the container. So we ordered a special kit for a 40-foot high cube container. And the real interesting thing is their videos just show them kind of going up one course at a time, right? Going all the way up to the ceiling, lickety split. I wish that's the way that this worked every single time, but the way it really works is if you look up top here, there's a small piece up there. And this is not the top of this third panel, fourth panel. So you have 4 panels you put in whole, and then at the top of every single panel that's a vertical stack, you're gonna have to cut a panel, and it's about 8 inches or so. And so what you end up doing is you have all these panels along the top that, again, I talked about earlier, the interface between the panels. If you lose that tongue and groove from the top of one panel to the bottom of the next panel, what you get is a not perfect fit. And so although they go in fairly well, there's not that tongue and groove interface, and so holding them against the sidewall of the container becomes a little more challenging, and we had to use some 2x4s across the width and kind of press fit them together to keep them where they were supposed to be until the adhesive setup. Having to cut every single top piece all the way around a 40-foot container, I was not too happy about. We asked InSoFast if that was in fact what we needed to do. I was hoping they were going to tell me, no, you're a total idiot, this is a better way to do it like this, and they said, no, that's what you do. I want to show you something else. Follow me. So I wanted to show you the details of this bathroom. After looking at this really kind of long and hard here, we were debating how to handle the plumbing drains and water lines. And they're really easy to run. That wasn't the problem. The problem really was, as we look at the InSoFast panel, we have obviously the thick and the thin sections. The thin sections have the embedded studs, which are great. And you can even see the course, the raceways that they have vertically, and they also have some you can cut horizontally. But if you notice, we have a 2-inch vent pipe here that tees off into a 1.5-inch drain. Very standard fare for lavatories and so forth, kitchen sinks, bathroom sinks. But if we cut 2 inches out of this, that drain would almost eliminate the insulation factor for this whole area. Even if we spray foam around it, we'd have a 2-inch tubular gap all the way top to bottom here, and we really weren't happy with that solution. And that's if we lined them up perfectly with the depth of the corrugation. If we moved over at all, even with the PEX line, we're only talking about if we ran a PEX right at the surface of this, basically a 1/2 inch, or we'd have maybe an inch or 3/4 of an inch of insulation between the PEX and the steel of the container. And so we weren't happy with that solution at all, especially that it gets pretty cold here, and we don't know exactly where this container may end up. If it ends up in Colorado, that's not acceptable. And so what we did was we actually ended up framing out this bathroom to provide us the depth we needed for the proper ventilation and proper spacing of the PEX lines away from that container. Now, we're confident that this is insulated well and sealed well, but this was a lot of extra work. And so that was another kind of a pain point with this particular install. Now, thankfully, the way we designed this container, all of the plumbing and drainage are at the back, where we have a large bathroom and the kitchen comes off of it, and there's no other sinks or drains at the other end. So we didn't have to run them lengthwise or anything like that. So some people would run them underneath, but again, this particular container is going to be in transit as it's purchased. And so we wanted to minimize any kind of work that needed to be done underneath, and especially we wanted to eliminate any drain pipes or water lines and so forth that were running the length of the container underneath its supports, because if you set that down on a flat slab, they'd be smashed. And so anyway, so that's what we had to do with this particular build. We're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to improve this and our final opinion on InSoFast. Alright guys, we're back with the rest of our InSoFast insulation review. So this is one of the sidewall panels. You can see the corrugation, the studs. Really, the panels are built really well. They seem to have decent insulation factors. This is a top piece, a ceiling panel, but this is the top portion of that, and you can see where it's been cut. We just used a Sawzall. It seemed to cut it real fast, real efficiently, and went through the studs really easily. But as I mentioned here a little bit earlier, when you cut these panels, you lose the interface between the tongue and groove of the next panel. So this is the groove, and if this was the bottom panel below this and we cut one to put it above, the tongue is gone. And so some of those pain points that we experienced, and we didn't show you the full ceiling detail, the reason why is the ceiling was a real bear. We followed their instructions to the letter. The panels did go up, they adhered perfectly fine, but what we find is when you support the ceiling from below and you press these panels up with the framework, scaffolding, whatever you want to call it, what you end up doing is you end up buckling the ceiling a little bit, and it can actually maintain that buckle, so to speak, as it goes, because we're gluing these panels in place. The other thing was their videos showed the sidewalls going up, there being a gap where they took these top panels and they just slid them in kind of up in the top openings and then pressed them together magically. Well, that didn't work. First of all, every single ceiling panel has to be cut widthwise because they're too wide for the container. That's right. These containers, not a width that this accommodates. And the reason why, these panels are their original panels. This is what they use to insulate basements and so forth. They're not made for containers. So they use them, and that's fine, but the width has to be cut on every single panel. And that's a bit frustrating when you have a 40-foot container and you're doing several of these at a time. It's a lot of cutting, and the cutting's not the problem. It's a lot of mess. This styrofoam, which we didn't talk about, when you cut it, there are these little balls that, as you know, you've unpacked gifts and stuff. It goes everywhere, and so it's all over your clothes, it's in your face, it's all over the container, and you just have to keep vacuuming and sweeping all the time. Okay, folks, so let's do a quick recap. In conclusion, number one, the wall panels Cutting those wall panels, the top course of the wall panels eliminated the tongue and groove interface to the panel below it, causing some issues since the container walls were not straight. That caused issues requiring more scaffolding and supporting until those panels were held in place. The other issue that we ran into was with the ceiling panels. Neither the instructions nor the phone call that I made to InSoFast resulted in an accurate dimension that we could use to cut the wall panels so the ceiling panels would pop into place as they show in their video. We could have used shims on the sides and just scaffolded the center. Unfortunately, that didn't work, so we had to build scaffolds to hold all the ceiling panels up from the side, the center, and so forth. So that was a real pain. It delayed the process, having to wait for each course of ceiling panels to dry. The third issue that we ran into was with the plumbing and electrical and pipes and so forth. And so running plumbing, vents, the PEX lines for the water, electrical, and so forth. You can see other videos where they talk about how convenient it is to have raceways for the electrical, but also how difficult it is to actually run electrical cable down those raceways for any length at all. And a lot of people are building ceiling trays and so forth just because of the difficulty. We didn't feel it was a viable solution to spend this much money, which we'll talk about here in a minute, on this insulation package and then have to cut it away to fit our drain vents and so forth. So we ended up framing out that bathroom, which was additional cost and time, but it did result in a better end product. The fourth issue that we came across was we purchased a number of panels. We were under the impression from the literature and from the call with InSoFast that the number of panels we received was the amount needed to cover the side walls, the end wall, and the ceiling, which was the kit we bought for a 40-foot high cube container. However, there is about over 20 panels, probably 15 or 16 full panels left, which means those are panels we paid for, which were not needed for the installation. Now, granted, we had window installs, window openings, and door openings, but those did not account for anywhere near that number of panels. So from a business perspective, that means we are paying actually for more product than is needed to get the job done, which is not a good thing to do. So let's talk about project cost. In the end, we ended up spending $2,897 on the kit itself. That did not include the spray foam gun that we needed, which was about $25, or the spray foam at about $15 a can, or the caulk gun that we needed, which was about $30 on Amazon, and the PL3 adhesive at about $8 a tube. Now, given that we went through over a dozen cans of spray foam and probably 24 cans of the PL3 adhesive, even though we followed their instructions with the bead size and so forth of laying down that adhesive on those ribs, we found that if the corrugations were bent at all in the ceiling or the walls, it actually took more adhesive to get that panel to adhere. In the end, we spent well over $3,000, probably close to $3,300 on the full install. It took about a week and a half, which in our opinion was the exact opposite of our desire. We were willing to spend a little bit of extra money to gain a little bit of speed in completing this insulation and the wall studs, the frame out, so to speak, since the studs were embedded in the InSoFast, and that's not what happened. We actually spent more on insulation than if we would have used 2x4 or metal studs and used closed cell spray foam on the project. So it cost more and took longer, which was a real disappointment. So in the end, would we recommend for our type of installation, for converting a 40-foot high cube shipping container, would we recommend InSoFast? Answer is absolutely no. Definitely not. We won't be using it again. I could see how it would be helpful on an exterior, applying those panels to the exterior and then applying siding, but when you're finishing out an interior and you need to run plumbing and water and electrical and so forth, cutting into the insulation you just paid for doesn't make sense, and it simply was not as easy to install as they showed unless you have a very straight, perfect new container. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you've seen, please click the like button down below. Subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to click that bell icon so you can get updates on all of our new videos.